in this case. All of the evidence that was developed pointed toward either nothing on that issue or toward self-defense. HPD did not do any investigation of the deceased officer. They only investigated our client. And that's not how you do that type of work. And then it got forwarded to the Harris County District Attorney's Office. And they didn't critically evaluate it either. So this man had to go 2 years and a full jury trial when absolutely not one shred of evidence ever pointed to him not having the right of self-defense. Nothing came out in the trial. Nothing was in the discovery because there never was any evidence that would have justified having this prosecution. But the jury saved us from having a tragedy. How often can we count on that? I contend very seldom. We have got to have some rules. We've got to have some type of legislation so that when there is an officer involved shooting, that is not investigated by the exact same agency that considers the down officer their brother. We have to have objectivity in every type of an investigation. We have to have integrity in the worst of our cases and the best of our cases. We have to know that the investigation is being taken seriously and will be objectively handled. And when it comes to prosecutions, it's clear with this case and with many other cases we see around the nation. The local district attorney's office works with the police department too closely to be prosecuting officer-involved shootings. Their objectivity is gone too. We need special prosecutors for those situations, and we need referrals for the investigation. In this case, we got really fortunate because I ended up being unable to complete the trial. And Wade, my partner, came in and had a Herculean effort to pull this thing through to the end. I knew he was ready, but I'm not sure he did. He is a great lawyer, and it had a horrifyingly heavy burden that fell right on his shoulders. He pulled it off anyway. Wade, do you have anything you want to say real quick?
Sure. You know, it's like I said yesterday, everybody, and I mean everybody, is entitled to a fair chance at justice. And like Paul said, the system failed in that regard as far as HPD and the District Attorney's Office is concerned, because he didn't get fair justice from those agencies. Fortunately, we live in a country that has the jury system, and we got a fair administration of justice from the jury.
Questions, anybody?
So what's next now?
This case is over. It can't be retried. He's acquitted. He's as innocent as he should have been from the very beginning. There is no next on this case.
We understand he's also facing other kind of charges.
I understand that's the case too. Those are not charges I've ever looked at. We're not on those cases.
Do you think this is an issue that with HPD's SIU unit, or the fact their homicide guys didn't have any role in investigating this? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think there's a reason why the homicide detectives were not brought into the case. This is the biggest homicide for that calendar year. And all of the senior officers and all of the homicide departments were excluded. And the poor person that ended up having this on her shoulders, she was lost. She did not have the remotest clue how to conduct an investigation. The chief of police was on scene. The assistant chief of police was on scene. This got assigned to that person not randomly but intentionally. There was an effort from the very beginning to make sure that the investigation was tilted and incomplete. They were counting on the public rushing to a justice that wasn't going to be justice. They were counting on a jury that would not let somebody that looked like our client be acquitted of killing what turned out to be an off-duty officer. It had to have been intentional. This was the biggest homicide of that year, and it got assigned to a very junior officer that wasn't even in homicide. There is no excuse for that. But that's what happens when you've got a conflict of interest. When you've got a conflict of interest, every decision you make is tainted by your relationship to the incident. We can't have conflicted investigations. We have to have neutral agencies. HPD has got an excellent homicide division. They didn't even use them. But also in this same community, we've got the homicide division for the Texas Rangers and the homicide division for the Harris County Sheriff's Department. Our whole community deserves to have all of these cases investigated by people that don't have conflicts and prosecuted by people who don't have conflicts. It's just wrong. And it's way past time that we do something about making sure that we take that temptation away from human beings that work with these people day in and day out. A lawyer would never be allowed to have a case that they had that kind of a conflict. And the police department is more critical than any single lawyer. We've got to have rules. We need legislation. We need somebody to stop and make sure that justice is always impartial. And we don't have that right now.
What are your client's thoughts after the decision that was made? How does his family feel?
Well, I haven't seen the client. Wade talked to him. He was in the courtroom. I'm still on disability. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. But the family's here, and they feel vindicated. I mean, this guy was innocent from the very beginning. He never became any more guilty. Not one shred of evidence ever came in tending to indicate this wasn't self-defense. I don't think they feel like they got lucky. I don't think that they feel like that this is a beautiful thing. I suspect they're just relieved that it's over.
Can you talk about some of the missteps in the investigation that you talk about how there were really green officers investigating it? So what are the missteps that they made?
Well, the very first thing that happened that just shocks the conscience, Officer Rios' cell phone was found on the ground right outside of his car, indicating it was probably in his lap when he got out. The cell phone was turned on. They didn't secure that phone. They let the battery run down, and they've never been able to get past the password. But it was open and ready for them. A neutral agency, neutral officers, the first thing they would have done is secure his cell phone. Go back through his text messages, go back through his social media, go back through his phone calls. I don't know what evidence would have been there, but I know they did all of that on my client's phone. And they let this just run down to the point to where it was never available to any of us. That's the first thing they did. After that, Officer Rios was on some medications that have extreme mood-altering consequences from time to time. And he had twice the therapeutic dose of essentially speed. And nobody went to see his doctor. Nobody went to see his friends or his family members about mood alterations or anything of that nature. Nobody went to investigate it in any manner. His entire life should have been as scrutinized as my client's was. None of that happened. Not at all. The officer that was in charge of the investigation, she just collected reports and stapled them together. She never talked to the witnesses. Never. I've never encountered an investigation where the lead investigator was just a collection deposit for other people's reports. They usually drive the train, and then when there's an important witness, they want to talk to them themselves. None of that happened. Nobody sat down and put together an investigation outline. This is what all we need to do. And here's who we need to assign to get it done. And then followed up to make sure it was done. None of that ever happened. It was all ad hoc. And you just can't operate that way. But that's what you do whenever you walk up to a situation and you assume that you know what happened. And all of us, when it happens to somebody that's really close to us, our assumptions are going to go in that direction. And theirs did. And they shortcutted every piece of investigation that would have been routine had they not been conflicted out. I don't think HPD ever does this bad of a job on an investigation when they don't have a conflict. They're very professional people. But conflicts remove our judgment. Conflicts limit our professionalism. Conflicts cause us to make sure our facts fit the conclusions that we had in the beginning, rather than forming our conclusions after we learn the facts. Conflicts destroy the confidence that you can have in any investigation. And we've got to get to where we don't have conflicted investigations for officer-involved shootings. Some other agency has to investigate when it's your officer that's involved.
Wade, can you give us any insight into your conversation with Mr. Soliz after the verdict was read?
I mean, he's obviously relieved, probably more than anybody. I think everybody kind of saw his reaction and looking up, he's thankful, one, for the jurors who made the right decision here. He was very thankful to us. You know, we have a great team here at our firm, from Paul to me to Millie Thompson, who was sitting second for me, to Clay Conrad, our other partner. Both of them did a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and all of our staff. You know, not everybody gets a team like that, and I think Robert was very thankful for that as well, and he was very appreciative of all the support that he received from his family that came and sat by every day of the trial.
When you had the opportunity to speak with the jurors, did they give any indication of if there was a certain piece of evidence or a certain fact that led them to that verdict?
They took their job very seriously. Not all of them stuck around to talk, but a few of them did. And I'm always impressed when I talk with jurors after the fact, because they always take their job very seriously. And they deliberated for a very long time, close to 8 hours, I think. And they read their instructions over and over and over again. They went through some of the exhibits over and over and over again, and they had a lot of discussions. And at least what was relayed to me, because I wasn't back there during deliberations, obviously, but what was relayed to me, what it came down to for them, was that there was no evidence that Robert was the first aggressor, or that he in any way provoked this, and there was nothing there to disprove self-defense. As Paul said, it was always self-defense. Every bit of evidence pointed that direction.
You went to great lengths to try getting former Chief Acevedo and current Chief Troy Finner to testify in this case, but at the end, we got none of those guys on the stand.
Right.
What did you hope to achieve with getting them in the courtroom, and why did you not use them anyways?
If I can respond to that.
Yeah.
As soon as I got retained on this case, I made two outreaches. One was to the Harris County District Attorney's Office to let them know, and the other was to Art Acevedo. I wanted Art to make sure that this got referred to an independent agency because his agency had a conflict of interest. I'd been sitting there watching all weekend, or all week rather, the statements that were being made to the press that were prejudging what happened, that they had no way of having any clue what happened. I had already seen the results of this conflicted investigation, and so I reached out to Art to try to get him to refer this investigation so that we wouldn't end up where we did end up. In addition to that, I had our client in this office filling out paperwork, and I was in touch with the lead investigator for the district attorney's office, who was in touch with Art. Told him where we were, asked where do you want me to bring him. I was told to bring him to the side door of the district attorney's office, and they would be there with police officers to take custody of him. Everybody agreed to that. The district attorney's office agreed to it. Art agreed to it. Everybody agreed to that plan of action. But what they did from the police department, again, shows how deep the level of conflict was. After telling me to do that, we're in this office and they know it. I've told them exactly where we are. Nobody came up to the door to ask to take custody of Robert. Nobody walked up here at all. What they did was they put more than 20 police cars in position to be able to take us down on the Katy Freeway. They had helicopters. They had every single TV station. This was a media takedown when they knew exactly where we were and exactly what we were doing and exactly where we were going. Before I left this office, I called to report. Okay, we're leaving now. You still want me to go to the same door? Yes, yes, yes. So we get out on the freeway, and they use unmarked cars to block my vehicle. I didn't see all the marked cars coming up behind me, but I'm being squeezed by these two unmarked cars, and I've got somebody in the car that I know needs to get downtown. So I almost jerked it and got into the HOV lane by running over the white pylons, because whatever these two idiots were doing, I couldn't have it happen while I was trying to transport this person. I don't know today how many times I would have been shot if I'd have done that, because as soon as I realized these are police officers, I stopped. I get out. I personally had more than a dozen assault weapons and shotguns cocked, loaded, and pointed at me. Robert had more than that. And then when it came, they were going to arrest him, they ran to the car and got a special set of handcuffs. They got Rios's handcuffs to handcuff him with. They had a conflict. I was reaching out to Art to make sure that we could have independence. And what we ended up with was one of the scariest things that I'll ever go through. And it was unnecessary. It exposed everybody on the Katy Freeway to danger. It was totally unnecessary, but it was an indicator of a conflict of interest. I needed Art to come in because I wanted to show that the reason that the investigation was flawed was because of the conflict of interest. He was responsible for assigning this to the people that it got assigned for. He was on scene. Not only did he not take responsibility for this, he didn't assign it to anybody that was logically in the chain of command. And he is responsible for what happened to me on the Katy Freeway. I had that man subpoenaed. I knew that he was leaving. We got him subpoenaed. We got him served. And for some bizarre reason, unknown to anything in law, the judge quashed the subpoena and let him off the hook. And from that day, I haven't been able to find Art Acevedo. He is the slipperiest little fella you will ever try to track down for a subpoena, but he shows up at every press conference that you could ever imagine. For a while, he was working at CNN, and I would get after-action reports of where he'd been, but I never could find out where he was so I could get him served. And the judge would not delay the trial so that we could track down the centerpiece of our defense, which was Art Acevedo.
But what about Troy Finner?
He didn't have enough to do with it to be a good substitute. Acevedo called all the shots.
So how do you think they avoid this issue in the future? Because you could say...
Refer it to either one of the highly competent other homicide departments that cover this area. Secure the location, bring other people in that have no conflict, and let them do their job.
Does that need to be a change on the state level? Because that's the case for every agency.
Every agency should adopt it as best practice. Every agency should. But we shouldn't leave it up to the agencies to do that. We need statewide legislation that requires it. This is just unbelievably wrong and totally avoidable. We have outstanding alternative agencies right here, right now, that stood ready. Harris County would have come in if invited. The Rangers would have come in if invited. But they have no right to come in unless invited. That has to change. We need to redo this legislation. We've got to protect our people from conflicts of interest.
Is this the first case as severe as this that you've seen?
With the conflict of interest? Yeah, probably. And I've been through some fairly severe cases. I was Tim McVeigh's first lawyer. I did a whole bunch of the Waco bikers. I was in the Branch Davidian case. But as far as the conflicts of interest jumping up and completely tainting the whole process, yeah, this is probably the most severe thing I've ever personally witnessed. And it also leaked over into the district attorney's office. They knew they had no evidence of anything except self-defense. So what did they do? They assigned it to a prosecutor that has a history of being fast and loose with the truth. They assigned it to Sarah Seeley. And she did everything she could to bull this through. I hope her supervisors will get a transcript of the trial and compare her statements with the facts. We've got to have prosecutors that are not working on a case that involve the people they work with every single day. The conflict of interest completely tainted the entire process. Harris County got lucky. We got lucky. Robert Soliz got lucky. The jury saved all of us. This could have been a complete tragedy. The jury saved all of us from what we were doing.
Could you please tell us your full name as well?
Paul Looney.
Wade Smith.
You glad you didn't get that mistrial?
Yeah, now.
Absolutely now.
And what she's referring to is after it became obvious that I was going to need a period of recuperation before I could resume, the judge delayed the trial almost long enough for me to get back, but not enough. And I believe she should have granted a mistrial and let Wade start over with his trial his way. Because making another lawyer take up somebody else's case, I've never heard of that done before in the middle of a trial anywhere in the world. It's just unimaginable. And it could have been a catastrophe, but the guy did a hell of a job. And he carried an unbelievable weight across the finish line.
Now this is over, do you have a sigh of relief?
Me?
Yeah.
I guess, emotions come in various stages. When I first got the first text message that it was a not guilty, it was probably 40 minutes before I could talk to anybody because I was crying so much. After that, I kind of had a stunned feeling of relief, and today I'm just pretty angry. And I'll probably want to apologize to a lot of people tomorrow after I get over being angry. But the thing that I hate most about my job is being placed in a position to where I'm standing between a runaway system that is failing to function and a single human being. You don't get to rest at night. You don't get to relax on the weekend. It's such an enormous responsibility that it steals your quality of life. And over the next couple of weeks, I want my quality of life back. But it's going to take a little bit.
Thank you.
They might, you might want to, you can ask them. They may.